Just take a look at the way technology's changed the way that we all bank and pay our bills. And societies, people worldwide, are becoming cashless. Is that good for business, or could it punish the poor? You're watching Roundtable with me, David Foster. When was the last time you paid for something with real money, money you can touch? In my case, I think it was probably about 3 days ago. Has technology set your finances free or bound you up in debt? Cashless society, is it as easy and convenient as it appears? Technology is changing the way we use money. From taxis to takeaways, our payment details are now stored everywhere. And many of us can go days without visiting a cash machine. Is a world without cash on the horizon? Sweden is on the way to a cash-free future. A recent survey found that 36% of people never use it. And in 2016, barely 1% of the value of all payments were made using coins or notes. In the UK, debit cards are set to take over cash payments later this year. And by 2026, cash could be used for just 21% of all payments. Supporters say going cashless would save time and reduce cash-based crime. One study found that across 100 cities worldwide, consumers and businesses would save 3.2 billion hours of time between 2017 and 2032 due to faster digital payments. In the developing world, the cashless revolution continues. Despite a population of 1.25 billion people, India has only about 132,000 bank branches and 218,000 ATMs, the cash machines, a fraction of which are in rural areas. Customers have now turned to new digital payment platforms that allow them to pay with their phones from wherever they are. But the switch to a fully cash-free future could threaten society's most vulnerable. According to UK Finance, more than half of those people who rely predominantly on cash have a household income below $22,000. The charity Age UK has warned that older people may be disproportionately affected by a complete transition. And the very poor can't take plastic if they're begging on the streets. There are also security concerns. Swipe to pay goes hand in hand with fraud. Losses in Britain caused by contactless crime rose from around $4.2 million in early 2016 to around $8 million in 2017. And recent data hacks have highlighted problems with managing personal finances in the digital age. Commentators say the move to a fully cashless society is still a long way off, but it is well underway. It could be up to banks, regulators, and tech innovators to make sure that in a new system of alternative payment platforms, no one gets shortchanged. I'm very pleased to say that joining us over Skype from Trondheim in Norway, we have Trond Andresen, a control engineer doing research on monetary systems and related technological possibilities. That's at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. With me actually at the round table, we have Audrey Giroud, the founder of mobile money-saving app Chip In. Graham Mott's here too, head of strategy at Link. That's the UK's largest cash machine network, keeps them all joined up. And David Clarke, head of policy and advocacy for positive money campaigning. And David, you'll tell us what you're campaigning about in just a moment. But Audrey, let me come to you. First of all, welcome to the programme. Let me come to you first and say you do believe we will have a cashless society.
Yes.
Good
absolutely.
or bad, or why?
I think it's great. I think you said it earlier. It is about convenience. People just want to pay faster. They want it to be easy. And technology allows us all to do things faster generally. I think it is all about convenience. I don't really agree that it will mean that some groups will be underserved necessarily. I think the technology needs to be adapted for more underserved groups. But I think it's not that the technology is a bad thing. I think it's just that we need to adapt.
Well, we will come to that in a little bit, because it's about the elderly, perhaps those who are not so technologically savvy. How would they get to use the system? But I want to put this question out there in general. Why is it any more convenient to use a card in your pocket, which you have to remember to take with you, than to use the £10 note or kroner that you've got in your pocket that you have to take with you?
The evidence is that millions of people don't agree with you. They find cash is a convenient means of payment. So the majority of us use cash on a regular basis. 2.7 million people.
When did you last use cash?
Like yesterday. I mean, I use card payments a lot, but I also recognise that, you know, millions of people, given a free choice, with access to bank accounts, with access to financial services, they choose to continue using cash. The ability to make payments is fundamental to anybody's participation in the economy, and people should have a free choice over how they access their money.
And from a link perspective, I mean, we connect all the ATMs in the UK, and as has been said, you know, there's a lot of evidence that a significant number of people use cash. Almost everybody uses cash on some occasions. There's only about 2.9 million people claim to never use cash.
But Graham, in this country, it was a couple of years ago, it wasn't that very long ago, that the number of people using cash went below the 50%.
Oh, absolutely.
I think it went down to about 48%. Perhaps it's gone down even further. People like you are... You're like King Canute in a sense. You know the tide's coming in and you're trying to push it back. There's nothing you can do to change progress. So how do you change?
I think we're not. Our Link's role is not to push back against, you know, the non-cash payments. Our role is to make sure that those who want to use cash still have access to cash. So what we're concerned about is to make sure that remote communities, rural areas and deprived areas who often use cash a lot still have access to cash. So what Link's role is to make sure that as time change, and the network will change, we've got 70,000 ATMs, almost certainly in the future we won't have as many.
How many, what was the peak?
It's almost at the peak, actually, so it's pretty much a record number of machines, particularly free-to-use machines that are an all-time high. So there's about 55,000.
I can remember when there were none.
Exactly.
And you had to go to the bank on a Friday afternoon. Trond, one of the reasons we asked you to come on the programme was because in Scandinavia, Norway and Sweden in particular, there has been a greater propensity to go towards a more cashless society. In general terms, and then we'll get to specifics, why do you think that is?
Well, I think we are fairly proficient in all sorts of use of modern IT infrastructure. Today, let's say 90 to 95% of all payments in Norway is made by bank card in the supermarket, for example. And we do our bills using the computer over the internet. And we haven't used mobile phones so much yet, but that's coming up very strongly these days. But I would like to say, I mean, this discussion, should we have cash or can we go to the cashless society? It's like a discussion, could we keep the long playing records and not go to digital sound? Because this is mercilessly coming anyway. You can't stop it. It's just like new technology for all sorts of fields. So what we should discuss, how do we regulate the transition and how do we make some allowances for those who are late in the digital revolution? I mean, I remember, let's say 10 or 15 years ago, we had this big discussion in Norway about the elderly and email and the internet and so on. And I mean, now the geezers are also using the internet all over the place. So this is something that's coming. We have to discuss how to regulate it in a humane and good way.
I suppose that could also be because those who are elderly now weren't elderly 15, 20 years ago, and therefore they sort of almost grew up with the technology. Those who were old then didn't understand it, and they're no longer with us. That's a different discussion. I'll come on to some of the changes there have to be, but I think we also have to look back and wonder why cash has failed, in a sense.
I wouldn't say cash has failed. I think cash is extraordinarily resilient. It's still, widely used across every country in the world, and the advantages of cash, I think, are what some digital payment systems find difficult, not impossible, but difficult to replicate. It's very portable. If I want to pay someone else, the transfer of value is instant. It's very easy to budget with it. You can subdivide it almost infinitely. It provides reassurance. It doesn't require any technology, so if the system goes down, if you lose access to the internet, your phone battery dies, you can still buy stuff. So I think the advantages of cash are significant, and I think obviously contactless in certain circumstances works very, very well, and almost everybody uses it to a certain degree, but cash still has a place.
You cannot get on a bus in London without a contactless.
No, you can't, absolutely, yes.
So cash is useless there, and it's going to be eroded in other places too.
But public transport is an interesting area in that there's one supplier, Transport for London, and therefore they can set the rules as they like, and you still have to travel. For a coffee shop, and there are a few coffee shops in London which don't accept cash, it's much more difficult because there's other coffee shops next door that may choose to accept cash. So transport systems are different, and London Underground, huge numbers of people travelling every day, so speed and efficiency is very, very important.
David, jump in.
I want to take issue with this idea that cash is we're just kind of waiting for it to die out. It's only old people using it.
Why do you like it so much?
I mean, cash is used, there's a pretty even spread across the population in terms of age who are still using cash. A significant section of young people like to use cash because, as you say, it's like helpful for budgeting. Like, you can always tell how much money you have.
And it feels good sometimes, doesn't it, to think I've got this.
And I think it's easy to get into this way of talking about people relying on cash as something that we have to rescue them from, when actually people have a lot of very rational, legitimate reasons for wanting to use cash. All the evidence is that will be true for decades into the future.
Trond is saying you're a bit like the long-playing record. You are destined to be a collector's item, gathering dust.
Not anytime soon. There's all the evidence is for decades to come, there will be a significant section of the population who want to continue using cash, given a free choice, given that option isn't taken away from them.
I think records, it's getting off the cash, are still around. I was looking at a record shop outside.
And you have to pay more for them than you ever did.
And you have to pay more for them, and it's an electronic shop outside, and it's selling turntables. There's still a place for non-digital media, if you want to call cash a non-digital media.
Trond, did you want to say something?
Yes. The interesting thing is that while we are discussing use of cash and how long it will last in advanced countries, if you go to Africa and Asia and Latin America these days, you will find countries where poor farmers in the countryside, where there are no ATMs, no bank branches, most people don't have any bank account, are using their primitive Nokia mobile phones to transact peer-to-peer, just using encrypted sound between the phones, not high-tech at all.
Yeah, this is fascinating. We're talking about, in particular, countries such as Kenya, which has a Safari-named network there, Congo and other places, because the phone is ubiquitous. Yeah, it's easier than installing an ATM. Amazing, isn't it, when you think of the inaccessibility of some of these places?
Yeah, I mean, these countries are going directly from to wireless mobile phone systems with no cable-based infrastructure before. And this is happening all over the place. And if they can do it, of course, we can do it.
Do you buy, Audrey, in fact, anybody here, do you buy Trond's argument that people have to learn to adapt? They will learn to adapt, like the elderly some years ago couldn't do email, now they can. Do you think that we are as aware of the problems for those who aren't au fait with this system as we should be?
I think we're probably not quite as aware as we should be, but I do agree that as a society we need, I think generally everyone will need to adapt to transacting digitally. We used to have checkbooks. I personally have only used a checkbook, I think, twice in my entire life. And this used to be one of the main means of payments, at least where I grew up.
Well, I wrote a check last week and I almost forgot how to do it. Which bit do I have to put here? Which bit do I have to put there?
Absolutely, and it used to be a lot more popular. So it has changed. Generations have pretty much stopped using checks. So I think we've seen different forms of payments. Obviously, cash has been around for such a long time. It's not going to disappear anytime soon. But I think the sooner we can help people adapt to the changes that are coming, the better.
Now, we have two issues here, in my opinion. You'll tell me there are many more. One is that you have to, if you're going to go electronically, then you trust the retail banks, the banks we use at the moment, with your cash. Your working money is paid into there, they pay off your standing orders. So it's still the same system, it's just you don't have cash in hand. Or you have a digital currency, which could or could not be regarded as more secure. These are two elements we're looking at. Which one is going to be done first? The retail banking system still existing?
This is a really important point to understand about the decline of cash. The only alternative that we have to making cash payments at the moment is using money stored at a high street bank, and that's one of a few institutions. It's a problem for so much power over the payment system to be so concentrated. That means that if there's a technology failure in one of those banks, that potentially, like, we all lose access to our money and the economy grinds to a halt. It's also even worse that these are institutions which are fundamentally risky. That we saw in 2008, they required billions of pounds in taxpayer funding to bail them out to avoid the economy grinding to a halt. So we do need to, alongside physical notes and coins, have a digital version of cash, a central bank digital currency.
Or perhaps a Britcoin.
Britcoin, exactly. Yeah, we need to give people access to safe, stable central bank money, just like cash, but in a digital form.
Do you think our central bank, the Bank of England in particular here, is thinking about that at the moment?
They have a research program looking into it. I think they're not looking into it seriously enough. I think that a lot of the benefits of having a digital cash, a central bank digital currency, will only be recognised by government. So government needs to also take the lead in looking into this.
So what is the difference between money that's issued based on the gold standard, and you've got the gold in reserve or gold reserves, and a digital centrally bank funded currency? It's exactly the same, isn't it? It's just that one has a physical element in gold and the other has bits.
Digital.
Yeah. ... etc. So there's no difference really, is there? They're both backed by the government, but is it the trust in the retail banks that's eroding so fast, the high street banks, as you put it, that means that we're actually going to go down a totally different path?
I think the issues with all non-cash alternatives, and this has come up with other areas, is the question of privacy and people being tracked. And I think there is a definite pushback against that, and we're seeing with Facebook and Cambridge Analytica that there's a pushback against the idea that every single transaction you do, every single part of your life, it will be monitored, and there's a record of it somewhere. And people, you don't have to be doing anything illicit or illegal, but people like the idea that I can go out and buy coffee, I can go out and buy a record, I can go to a pub or a bar or a cafe without it being tracked somewhere and somehow importing some sort of algorithm.
Yeah, and yet another argument is that money laundering would be a great deal more difficult if you didn't have cash, but we'll come to that in just a minute. Trond, sorry, I jumped in as you were about to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the Norwegian Central Bank is now starting to discuss allowing people to have direct accounts at the central bank. And if you have an account at a central bank in a country that issues its own currency, like the UK do and like Norway do, but not the Eurozone, then this cash is just as safe as physical bills. But if you have a bank account and you have a truly big financial crisis, you can lose part of your savings. And this is also what EU is working on, changing the laws so that there is a possibility that if there's a crisis, your savings is converted to equity in the bank that is going bankrupt. And this is truly bad. So I would say that let's have our own currency like you have and like we have in Norway, and let everyone be able to open a digital cash account directly at the central bank. There is no reason today, because of the IT infrastructure, we can all have accounts directly at the central banks, and then the regular banking system is reduced to be mediator for loan extension. That's my opinion.
Okay, how are you going to convince anybody that digital currencies are secure, if you like? Because we've seen Bitcoin's one of them. It just went off. It took off like a supersonic plane. But it's been coming down and down and down and down because people aren't quite sure what to make of it. Yeah, Trond, finish up. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a central bank in a country that issues its own currency is the only institution in the universe that by law is allowed to create as much of that currency as they can, out of nothing, out of thin air. So a deposit in a central bank cannot per definition be lost.
So it all comes back to trust and to the mothership, if you like.
It's questionable, really, even whether we should be talking about Bitcoin and the like as a currency, because they're primarily used as a speculative asset. But one of the things that got people interested in cryptocurrencies...
But will perhaps be used, so that's why we're talking about it.
Yeah, one of the reasons people got interested in digital currencies in the first place is this opportunity to save money and make payments electronically without having to rely on a high street bank, which the majority of people say don't serve their customers' interests, or they don't trust to serve their customers' interests.
But isn't this going to make the world a more secure place? If it is, the irony is that you put it into an institution you don't necessarily trust, i.e. the banks, because they've gone haywire in the past. You put it in there because they are perhaps still more secure in terms of criminal enterprises than perhaps having cash in your hand and money laundering operations, which we've seen. And we're told that it's more difficult to do it if you put it in the bank. So if people if they stop using cash, let me put it this way, there'll be less chance to launder money.
Well, you look at the evidence from Sweden, where the amount of cash in circulation has declined quite a lot, and there hasn't been an equivalent decline in the amount of laundering. So I think we should treat those predictions with caution, that getting rid of cash is going to be beneficial for fighting crime. And I think, what you're talking about in that case, if you do want to minimize cash use to fight crime, the only way of doing it, of having any benefit, is to get rid of cash entirely, which I just don't think is something we should countenance, because it's going to harm the millions of people.
It is a fact, though, Trond, isn't it? I mean, as David said, I think electronic fraud in Sweden's doubled in the last 10 years.
Well, I'm not aware of the situation in Sweden, so I can't comment on that. But obviously, if you go the route that I would like, putting all deposits in the central bank, then you can have software programs running 24/7 in the central bank, monitoring transaction patterns. I mean, you can talk about privacy. I think that's a completely, it's a very, not an important point. The important point is the enormous amount of criminality happening all over the world. And if you ask the police in Europe, in several countries, they say, get rid of the big nomination bills. Mm-hmm. And I can see a future where we have physical cash for a long time, but only small denominations. And that would, and we do all the big payments electronically, and that will hit black economy, tax evasion, and crime to a large degree, in my opinion.
It used to be called paper money, I think worldwide and in this country. But now when you talk about small denominations, Trond, in the UK, the fiver and the £10 note, they don't feel like money anymore. They feel like a plastic bag, which is one reason I think people may go off cash. No, I'm not asking for your opinion on that one.
That's an interesting point, because I do hear a lot of people complaining about the fact that it's
horrible,
plastic.
Well, I suppose it lasts longer in your machine.
It lasts longer, yes. That's the advantage. It's much more hard to counterfeit, going back to the point about criminality, and the notes are much more durable, and when it's cleaner, the cotton paper ones were quite difficult to keep.
And these are made of a polymer, aren't they?
It's polymer, no.
Yeah, and you can stick them in the washing machine, they still come out the other
end. They come out. You could actually do it with
laundered
paper ones
money.
as well. Laundered money, exactly. Yes. Not quite indestructible, but you have to set your mind to it.
David, where are we going? Where do you think?
So eventually we'll
talk about a generational thing with Trond. So let's take us to the top of the next generation.
I think we will see widespread issuances of central bank digital currencies, digital cash. I think central banks will have to adapt to a world in which cash use is declining, and so they have to look at how do they provide citizens with access to a safe form of money, which is one of central banks' primary responsibilities. And I think they will choose to do that using digital cash. But cash is going to be with us for a long time to come. Unless the vested interests have their way, and we take that option away from people. Given a free choice, people will prefer to.
So governments have to catch up. They have to think that this is the way of the future, and they can pull it all to the centre, and we'll all be safe. I think that's possibly some of the messages we've been getting out. Although those horrible £5 and £10 notes will be around for some time. I'm sure the Swiss franc hasn't gone that way. Audrey, Trond, thank you very much indeed. Go out and spend some krona this afternoon. I will say thank you very much indeed to you and to my guests at the round table. YouTube is where you can find us, as well as if you're watching on a satellite dish, you'll find us live in a few hours' time. But also, you can go to YouTube, look up Roundtable, leave your comments as well, good or bad. We do like to read them, and we do pay attention. In the meantime, your payments, ladies and gentlemen, are in little brown paper bags out the back. There's not very much in them, and it may rattle a bit because it might just be coppers rather than notes. From me, David Foster, and the Roundtable team, thank you for watching. Hope to have your company next time. Bye-bye.